Hi guys, today in this tutorial we will create a quiz app, and you can see that we have here some values, and we are going to select these values one by one, and after completion of these values we have here result as well. I have made it as much light, that's why it is not showing for skipped answers. So here it is showing one answer is skipped, one answer is correctly answered, and three answers are wrong. And these are three answers which are showing with red color, and the answer which is correct is showing here with a green color, and that answer which is skipped is showing with yellow light or similar to yellow light color. So let me again refresh, and you can see that whenever we refresh that page, every time these options are making random changes, because the user would not have every time the answers at the same position. I'm just pressing here all and a library, and I have made here dummy options and dummy questions. So our main focus is just to create quiz applications in React.js. So here we have 0 answers skipped, one answer is correctly answered, and the 4 answers are wrong. So without wasting any time, let's get started and move to our VS Code. So let me show you the intro of our components that we have created till now. Here we have a folder, and inside this folder we have a component which is an array that I have created already. So what I have to do now, I am just going to display or render my app component. Just press Ctrl S, and here it is successfully rendered. So what we have to do now, I am going to create another component inside our components folder. Its name is as header.jsx, and here I am just going to take an image that I have already imported inside our that image folder. So I have to import that image inside our that component. Here I have to take image and closing tag, and the second thing that I have to do here, I am just taking h1, and here I am just writing React.js quiz app. Ignore app, just write quiz, and I have to import that header inside our app component. So here I am going to import our header, and the very first thing that I have to do in app component is grading system, which is taken from our React Bootstrap. Container will be as fluid, and inside this container I am going to take two divs. The first div is as row, and these divs would be for columns, So here I am just taking column medium device as 6, and I am going to render all the code inside that column. So here I am going to take that header component and I gonna display it. It is not displayed here because we have not written the same component spellings. Now here it is successfully written, so I gonna write it at the center. Now what I have to do, I have to take an image before that phrase that I have written here. Here inside my app component, I am going to import the image. I have not initialized any variable here in which I have to store that imported image. And here I gonna display that image. I'm just writing it as 6 rem. I gonna take some margin from top. As 5 rem. 5 rem is so far. I'm just taking 3 rem or 2 rem is up to us. So what I have to do now, I have to display the quiz here that I have stored in a component which is an array and its name is as quiz. We have first element, and inside first element we have these values, and the answer have 4 possibilities. We have created total 5 elements. So here I am just going to take another component which is named as quiz. And inside that component I have to display all the code of our quiz. So what I have to do now, the very first step that I have to do is I have to import that array inside our that component which is quiz component. And what I have to do now, I want every element of that array should be displayed at once. So how can it be displayed as once? We should have to create an array. We should not basically going to create an array, but we should create a useState which would start from 0 and end at 5th element. So how can we do that? I'm going to take here a useState. I need here 2 useState basically. The first useState would handle all the elements number and the second useState that we are going to create would hold the elements that are selected by the user. So I am going to take here get entered ask. I'm just typing user answer and set user answer is equal to useState, and this will be an array because this user answer would store a complete array of the answers which would be selected by the user. And here I just need another useState, and its name can be as array element, and set array element is equal to useState, and initially it would be 0 because for the first time I am going to point out to our 0th index of that array. That's why I have taken here as 0 initially. So the second way that I can do here is I can take here a variable const array element is equal to, I'm just writing user answer dot length. Now our that constant variable would store the length of that array because for the first time the array is 0, so it would be initialized as 0, and whenever this array becomes 1, because whenever the user would select any value from our 0th index, our this array would become 1 because it would have to store one element. So for second time it would become 1, and now this variable would have to store 1, and so on. So I'm going to remove that useState from here. So what I have to do now, I have successfully initialized that variable. So here I am going to take text of that questions array. This text is, let me show you, this is a question which is stored in text variable. So here I'm just typing here h2 tag, and inside that h2 tag I'm just writing questions, and inside that questions I am pointing out to our that element dot text. Just save it, and here it is showing that value, so I have to write it inside curly braces. Now just save it, and here it is successfully showing the question for the first array. So what I have to do now, I am just taking here an array map because I have to map the values. Let me show you. This value was single for every time, that's why we don't need to write here any array map. But for this, so here I am just going to take our unordered list, and inside that unordered list I have to copy that code. Just press Ctrl C, and inside these curly braces I have to paste it dot answer, and now I am going to point out to that answers. So I am just taking here map array function, and inside this function I am going to take that callback function, and here I am going to pass some values as parameters. And inside these values I am going to take unordered list. This is list. So what we have to display here, I have to display element which is pointing to every element inside that answers array, and here I have to pass that key as well. Now just press Ctrl S and move to our output. It is showing all the values here in a sequence. This is the first index, second, third and fourth of our answers. So here I am going to take a style as list style, none. I am just going to take here a button, and that button would be imported from our React Bootstrap. Now just press Ctrl S, and here it is showing that way, but this is not good. But for the time being it is showing here all the elements inside that button successfully. Style as width of 100%, and I am going to take some margin margin 0.5 or EM. Now it is looking awesome. So what we have to do now, I'm just going to make some radius more, because this may not look like a button, but this may look like a beautiful outline. Border radius as 1 rem. So what I have to do now, I am just taking some background color of that complete quiz component, style as background color black, and color would be as white. We have to write in quotation, it is not at center. I'm just taking here some padding, text align as center, and padding as 2 rem. It is not completely a center, but looking awesome. And here I am just going to type font weight bold. So I have to write it at center because it is not at center right now. So what we have to do now, I'm just going to change that outline. I'm going to change the outline of that button as variant. Now it is looking like that, which we were needed. So what we have to do now, I want whenever I click on any of these buttons, these values should be stored inside a function which would be called by clicking on any of these buttons. So I'm going to take here a button which would be on click. Get user ons. Control C, and I'm going to take a function here. And inside that function, I have to pass a value. So what would value basically store? The value would store the element of the array which is passed to our that user answer. So I have to set that user answer. Control V, and here I am going to pass a callback function, and this callback function would return an array. We are going to type here previous val, previous val. It is not written here, previous val, and the value that I have passed, I'm just writing array index now. Just save it. And one thing more that I have to do, I have to pass any value as a parameter to that function. So the only thing that makes every button different is that key. So we are passing that key. We have to write here index, and here I am going to pass that index as a parameter, but for this thing I have to make that function as more controlled by React. Index, now press Ctrl S and move to our output. At line 12, I expected an assignment or function call. And here we have to write return. Now just press Ctrl S and move to our output. Now you can see all the arrays that we have written are successfully updated, but at the end, whenever all the arrays are finished, our value is incremented by 1, and this array, this element is further incremented and further that array mapping is called with our that constant variable, that constant value. So what we have to do now, but for this point I have successfully done all the code. I have written dummy data and options for this dummy data. Now there is one problem, that all the elements of that array, of every array, the first element is the correct answer. So what we have to do now, I want all these values should be shuffled for every time when the user refresh the page or move to any other question. So how can we do that? For this thing, I have to use here a sort function, and I am just typing array name dot sort, but this is not the array name. I am just telling it for that time. So what I have to do now, I want to shuffle this data. I'm just going to copy it from here and I am going to paste it. Array values, ans values is equal to, now this ans values have now the array ans values dot sort, because we have mentioned it at top, so we don't need to write its data type again. Here I am just going to pass values. Let me tell you what is that sort function. If I pass here a and b, and if at this time I am passing 1, it means these values should be same. But whenever I type here as -1, these values should be shuffled with each other. So we don't need to write here +1 or -1, because we want for sometimes these values would be shuffled with other values, like these values. I'm just pointing to that array till now. I'm not going inside elements. So now we have 4 elements inside that array, so we don't need to pass any value here. I'm just typing here a function math.random, and I am going to type -0.5, because now at this time the value would be either plus or minus. So if the value is plus, these elements which would be passed at this time when the value is plus would not be swapped or would not be sorted, but whenever the value becomes into minus, these values would be sorted, which are passed here. So now what I have to do, I'm just copying it from here and pasting it inside that map in which we are pointing to that array. Now just press Ctrl S and again move to our output and refresh that page, and you can see every time we refresh that page, the values are sorted with each other randomly, and all the other values are also sorted. But there is still a problem, that whenever we reach to the last element, it would be executed but we don't have any value of that array, so now we have to validate it. So till now our project is completed, almost half of the project is the main pillar that we have standard here. So what we have to do now, I am just taking here a function, and what is that function basically? I am giving a value and array. I'm just typing end of array element is equal to, I'm just comparing this array, Control C is equal to, if this array element would be equal to the length of that total question array, I'm just copying it and pasting it here, and I'm just typing it dot length. Now what is happened, I'm comparing if this array element is equal to our question dot length. I don't have to write here long, but I have to write here length. So into our end of array element, we have the value either yes or no, or in other words you can say true or false. If end of array, then what we have to do, then that function which is quiz function, it would return the value here. And what values are these? Let me show you. If there is end of that quiz, what we have to display here, I want there is an image here. Let me show you. I'm just typing image, and here I am taking h3 tag, and inside that h3 tag I am writing quiz completed. I have to write these values inside React fragment. I am taking here a div for my styling purpose, and here I am going to import quiz complete image. From image quiz end, I have to display that image here. Style as width of. Let me show you the first image that we have displayed inside our header. And one thing more that I have missed here, I have to write class name as image fluid. This is just for the responsiveness of our image for other devices. I have written width as 10 rem and height as 6 rem. I'm just typing width as 15 rem and height as 10 rem. Let me show you how is it looking like. this image is still small short, so I have to make it larger. That's enough. So I also want here a break and a horizontal line, because this is making the same thing. It is not going to mention to display any correct way. So here I am going to take HR. Now let me again show you how it would look like. Quiz completed. So I have made here that image. So what I have to do now, till this point I have completed my that quiz. So till end point we are able to get all the array which we have stored. I want whenever the user would type anything, here there should be a progress bar. So for that progress bar, I want there should be an other component, and this component would display the progress. I'm just writing question .jsx, and what it would return. Let me show you the same thing for the first time. I have stored the value inside our quiz component. So I am going to import our that question timer, and here let me show you where I wanna display it. I want to display that progress bar at the top of that question. Here I am going to display that progress bar. Question timer. Now just press Ctrl S, and here it is showing the output. So what we have to do now, inside our question timer, I am going to display a progress bar. Progress as animated. I have to import that progress from our bootstrap, progress bar from our React bootstrap, and here I have to write the same spellings, animated, and now I'm just going to type any value as 70 and max as 100. Now just save it and let me show you the output. It is showing like that, but it is still a static. Here it is still a static progress bar. It is not dynamically increasing or decreasing. Now I want to set these values of that progress bar should be dynamically low from top depending on our time that we have set. So for this thing I have to pass some values to that progress bar dynamically. So max can be, I can pass some values dynamically. So for this thing I am going to manage all the values from our quiz. So here I am going to pass some values as a props. I'm just typing total time. I'm writing 1000 millisecond because it is working in milliseconds. 1000 millisecond is equal to 1 second, and I am going to write 10,000 millisecond. These are showing to 10 seconds. Just save it, and inside our timer component I have to receive that props. Control C, and here I am going to receive that props as it is. And for this thing I am going to use here a useState. Remaining time, set remaining time is equal to useState, and I am passing that value, and here I am just typing that value because this is the total time that we have, and I have to change that time dynamically. So how can I change that time? I'm just going to use here a set interval. This set interval would be called automatically after some interval of time. Here I'm just typing set interval, and I'm going to take a callback function. So inside that callback function I have two parameters. One would be updated depending on our second, and second is nothing, but we are just going to pass the time, that after how much time that interval would execute our first variable or first parameter that we are going to pass here. So here I am going to type set remaining time, and this set remaining time would also be as callback function, and that callback function would receive some previous value, and here I am writing preval minus 100, and here I am just typing, because this value is dynamically low again and again, so here I am typing remaining time because this is the total time that we have passed here as a props, and this is the remaining time that is dynamically going to low again and again. So if I save it and move to our output, and you can see that till this point it is slowing gradually, and after this point it is taking speed as much greater till end. So what is the reason behind? Because it is making our set interval twice again and again. I am just going to set that interval as whenever first interval is called. Now after this interval I have to stop that interval, and to stop that interval we have here a function which is clear interval, and this clear interval would clear that interval, but for this thing it should return something, or for the time being I'm just passing here some value as const interval is equal to set interval, and I am going to clear that set interval, I'm just using here a useEffect. I'm cropping it, and here I'm using useEffect, and inside that useEffect I have to use callback function. Control V. I'm just passing another parameter here as empty. This useEffect function would be called at the first time when the page is reload. So after this code, till this code, it would return something. So here I'm just going to take here return type. Here I'm just going to type return, and it would return as this thing. Control X and paste it inside that return type. Now if I save it and move to our output, you can see it is now working successfully and slowly. So what happened here? I have already told you that this set interval is called for the first time when we didn't use our clear interval, but when we use our clear interval, it is not passed. So that's why our that set interval was not working successfully, because it was not cleared. So now with that return type, we are able to clear that interval. So every time it is executed for the first time and it is cleared, and it is going again and again. So this is how our that useEffect function is working. Control S, but still now our that code is not going to work successfully, because we need here a function that would store our null value, because if the user would not select any of these values depending on that time, and when this time is end, automatically the answer of these values would be stored as empty, because no one value would be selected for that case. So how can we do that? In our quiz app, I am creating a function for null, get user answer, and here I am typing const no answer selected is equal to, I'm just passing here as null. You can write anything here, it's up to you. I am just calling that function. I am not going to pass any value here, but I am calling to that function inside our that no answer selected function. Control V, and here I am passing null, because whenever our that function is called, which is no project selected, it would call that function, and that function is getting the value dynamically, and it would pass the value as null. Now this no project selected, no answer selected function would be moved to our question timer, because it would depend on the timer. If the timer is end, then it would call, otherwise it would not be called. and here I am going to receive that function as a props, and I am going to use that function here. I'm just writing set timeout, and here I'm passing two values. The first value would be called after that time, after total time, that first element or parameter or anything which is written at the first parameter would be executed after our that time, which is passed at second parameter. So we have to make some condition that when this function is called and when this function is not called, because whenever our timeout, this is whenever our total time is updated, then this function should stop working, and again it should start working again whenever this our total time is updated. So how can we do that? For this thing I have to use again a useEffect. I'm just going to crop it from here, and I'm going to use useEffect, and it would be also as callback function, and it would execute that code after whenever any update happens on let me see what I have passed here. Total time, and the second parameter is whenever that function is called or that total time is updated, then this timeout should work, otherwise it would not work, because only two possibilities are this function would call to that function after that time. If that time is updated, it means new time is came. So when new time is came, it should again start from 0, and or if that function is called, then it should also start from 0. So I'm just taking here another brace. Basically this is not necessary that whenever this function is called, of course this function would be called after that time, and whenever that time is updated, no, this function is no need to call and it would be never called. So we don't need to type it here. I gonna save it, and let me move to output. And also I am going to show you the output of that user answer in console. Console.log, just press Ctrl S and move to our output. This array has passed null, but now this value is continuing working. No new value came here automatically. So what is the reason behind? There is no reason. We want whenever that time is end. Let me show you. Here you have seen that new question is automatically came, and I have told you the reason that how this. Now what I have to do, I want whenever this progress bar is end for the first time, it should again start from the second time and from all the times whenever the new question came here. So why is it not working? This is not working because our that component, which is quick timer, which is question timer, whenever we pass here any key, so what is the function of that key? First let me show you. I'm just going to pass that value to that key. Now just save it and again move to our output. If I refresh it, you can see it came again, that progress bar. So just wait for the moment, and again you can see it came here again, and it would come again and again till our last question. So what is happened basically, whenever we pass any key to that component, after first execution with that array map, that question timer would be unmounted, and due to that key prop, it would be remounted again whenever that key prop is different. So that's why we have used here that key. Whenever this question timer is remounted, all these values are passed again. So this is the power of key that we can use in our array mapping, and we can also pass it in our components if we need in components. Whenever we want to call these functions again and again, depending on these conditions which we have passed here. So let me show you the output, what we have done till now. And if I refresh it, and here we would come up with an error, and let me show you what is that error. So you can see that when all the elements of that array are completed, and after some interval of time, let me show you, it is here showing that undefined. I have also created that array length. So here you can see that the length of that array is 9. We had only 5 elements inside that array. So why this became 9? Let me show you what is the reason. Our this React project is basically going to render twice at a time. Just because of our restrict mode, it is making these twice and these twice at 2 times. So let me show you what is that restrict mode. Due to that restrict mode, it is running that our React project twice, and this our React project is already rendering values at twice, so it became to render at 4 times. So why we needed basically our React strict mode? This strict mode is basically going to check for arrays and all the elements if our system, if our project is working successfully or not. So that's why it would second time check for all the errors inside our React project in detail. So it would display all the messages here in our console.log, and you can see that it is showing here the error first time, second, third, and this is 4. It is showing the error at 4 times, and at this time you can see we have total length of that array as 6. And let me show you what is the reason behind why is this showing that error. because it is rendering our components again and again for 4 times. So make this our user answer dot length is pointing to our that user answer array, and now at this time after it is rendering for 4 times, that user answer is being bounded outside of its region because we have only 5 elements. Let me show you in my question array. Inside my that question array you can see we have only 5 elements. So it is rendered just because of I have showed you, just because of our strict mode and our React project twice rendering mode. So that's why it is going to render all the components 4 times. So how can I resolve that problem? This is not the problem, but this is just to recheck if there is any error missing inside or our component is not being rendered for the first time successfully. That's why it is going to check again. So how can now we control that? Because we have only length of 5, and now for further times it is going to take length of that array and moving outside of the array bound. So now I wanna fix it. How can I fix it? I have already told you that for this thing we use callback function. Use callback is not a function, but this is hooks, React hooks. Use memo and use callback are almost same, but the main thing that makes both of them different, I have told you in my previous some lectures or some tutorials, that useState. Let me show you that use callback function. Here I am going to use that use callback function because it would only render depending on our condition that we would give it. So here I am just going to use callback, and I have to give here curly parentheses and here as well, and inside these parentheses I have to give here comma and write here empty array. Now this function would only be called, this function would only be executed if and only if that our get user answer function is called. Otherwise it would not be executed no matter our React components are rendered hundreds or 1,000 times. So for this thing, now if I save it, so let me show you another thing that I wanna do with our that project. With my no answer selected, I am also going to use here use callback, and I am going to give here parentheses and here as well, which is closing parentheses, and here I have to give braces, and now I am just pointing to our get user ans. This is just because of whenever this get user answer would be called, then it would pass that value as null, and I have made that user answer because now it would save our previous values as null, and after continuing these values it would further add some values inside our array. So this array, this is not an array but this is empty array. This array, if we initialize, if we declare here that empty array, it would only call that function whenever that function named is called, and it would not store our previous values because we are directly going to store the values inside our array. So if I save it, and here it is showing an error, that React hook use callback is called conditionally. So let me see what is the problem. So I have to put these values at the top of this our return function. Just press Ctrl X and move it outside of our that if condition. Now if I save it, and you can see that the error has gone, and I am going to select some values, and here it is again showing the same problem. So if I move in console, and here you will see that we have total length of array as 6, but it is rendered for one extra time. So how can we resolve it? Because we have only 5 elements inside that array. So let me see where is that function is called for the extra time. Inside that user answers, we should have 5 elements. Here we have called that function no project selected, and we have passed here null value, and it is calling to that function. So this is correct till this time. Now let me check. We have also invoked our no answer selected function inside our question timer component. If I move in question timer component, and here you can see we have used here useEffect, and here as well. And one thing more that you notice that inside this useEffect we have created that interval, and at the end we have cleared the terminal, and after that after the execution of all this block, it would simply clear the terminal, clear that interval which is created. So here we have not cleared our set timeout. That's why it is being rendered for the second time, and no answer selected and total time, both of these are being called during its rendering for the second time. So how can we resolve it? I have to just write here set timeout, clear set timeout, clear timeout, and we have to pass here some value. For this thing I am going to initialize that value, and now this value is pointing to our that set timeout, and now this set timeout will be end here or will be cleared here after just execution of our code. So here let me see clear timeout. We have to write it inside a function. That function is nothing but just our return type. I am creating it as a function because our useEffect would not return anything. That's why I am going to use here a separate function which would return something. Now if I save it and move to our output, and if I put all the values here, and here at the end you will see we have that array, and total elements of that array are only 5, so it would not be further rendered. This is just because we have no clear our time, which was working after some intervals depending on that time. So we have now cleared that timeout. So after it would execute, it would render for the second time. So whenever it would try to render that code for the second time, it will see that we have cleared that time. That's why it would not render it, because our time which is mentioned here is cleared after execution. So that's why it is clear now, and we don't have pointer to further elements of our array. So if I move here in quiz, what I have to do, I want the answers which I have selected inside that array. So instead of these elements or these indexes, I want to initialize the array with answers. So here, instead of writing index, I'm just going to write element to that function. Element, if I save it and move to our output, and here you can see that we have an array, and inside this array we have all the answers that we have selected. So what I have to do now, I am just going to display all the answers at the end of that quiz. So how can I do that? I'm just going to create a separate component here inside my quiz. Let me see. If end of array, then it would return these values. I'm just going to crop that code, and here I have to create a new component which is named as summary.jsx, and here I am going to write, let me remove it. And one thing more that I have to do here, I have to import that image which is for the same time inside our that quiz. So I am going to crop that image from importing inside our that component. And I am going to paste it inside our summary. Now we have imported that image, and what I have to do now, I am going to import the summary component inside our quiz component. Here I have to type import summary, and I am simply going to return here the summary. If I save it, and it is not going to show the same response. Our image is not being shown here. So what is the problem with our that image? Because our that component is not successfully rendered because we have S as capital. Now if I save it, and you can see we have the same output. So what I have to do now, I am just going to create the structure of form. So I am going to remove their sentence from here. Inside our that summary component, I have to pass the array which is in our quiz. We have that array which is as user answer, and now I have to pass that array as a props to our summary component. So let me see, where is our summary component? here we have that summary component, and I am going to pass it as a props here. If I save it, and now I have to receive that props inside our summary component. So what I have to do now, I am just going to display here the user answers. To display the user answers, I am going to set that image width as lesser. Now if I save it, that image, and I am going to remove that code from here. So let it be the same code which I have done here. So what I have to do now, I am just going to display the questions and their answers which I have selected here. So for this thing, I am first going to import that array which is containing the questions. Import questions. Now if I move inside that questions, let me show you. We have that text. Now we have to point out to that text. So after that text, we will display here the elements. What we have to do now, basically, we have all the elements of that array as first element having the value as true. So now I have to compare these values and display these values. So for the very first time, I am going to take here order list, unordered list, and inside this unordered list, I am going to use here user answer. We have to write it inside curly braces. User answer dot map, and here I am going to pass that value as element and index, and here I, because our map function will return something, and I am using here curly braces, and here I am going to type element. If I save it and move to our output, and here we have the answers that we have selected. So I am just going to make it inside h2 tag. I think h2 tag is more than enough. I am taking h6 and here as well. Now I have to copy it, I have to crop it from here and display it inside the header tags. So what we have to do now, I am just pointing to our questions as well, because we have all the values inside these questions. So after these questions we have that answer. I am going to display that answer inside p tag, and at the upper side I am taking h5, and that h5 would be holding the questions. Question, inside that questions I have index dot, here I have to type, let me show you. Here I am going to point that answers inside our that questions. I have to type here text, because we are just showing that question. that question for every element inside the array. If I save it, and here you can see what is React.js. This is the first question and this is the first answer that we have given, and all the answers here as well. So I have to make here some styling as well. I'm just taking here list style, list style as none, and inside that div I am going to take some background color and borders as well to make it unique from others. Style background color as I have to write inside quotations background color as white, and then color as black. If I make here some color, then what? I will make some color inside our app component. Inside that app component I am just typing here as style background color as gray, but that gray color is not making a good sense. I am going to change that color to purple. Now what we have to do, I am just going to take here question numbers as well. Here it will show the question number, first question, second question, third question, and so on. Here inside our summary I am just pointing the question numbers as well. So inside that question I am just taking again index +1. Now if I save it, let me write here dot instead of comma. Here it is showing the questions as well. So I'm also going to type here as text align right, text align as left, so it is making all the text at left, and I am taking here as padding left as 5 rem. Now it is looking awesome, and I am also taking here some padding as padding bottom. I am also typing here 5 rem. Now it is looking awesome. I am giving here some border radius as well. Border radius as 3 rem. Now it is looking awesome. What we have to do now, I'm going to give padding from all the sides as we need from top as well. If I save it, we have made a problem because we are going to point out that padding to our outer div, which is main div. So here I am going to paste it. And we have selected only two answers, first answer and second answer, and all the remaining answers don't have the output because we have not selected the outputs. So this is still the problem. Let me fix it. If element is null, then what we have to show here, skipped. Here it is showing skipped. What is that? It is that double questions are just pointing to that value. If that value of our that array is empty, then we would display here as skipped. So that's why it is going to display here as skipped. And what we have to do now, I am just going to make some, I am going to check if our elements of every array is matching to the first element of every array inside our that questions. All the first elements are correct for all the elements inside the main array. So now I have to compare it inside our that map. I am taking some CSS. Let CSS is equal to user answers. I am just going to set it. I am just going to take it at outside of that array. So here I have to point out all the values. If our user answer is simple, and now I am going to make some styling here. If element is equal to null, then its color will be as CSS class plus and equal to skipped, and here I'm just typing else if element is equal to Now what I have to do for the case if our element is true or not that we have selected, if our that element is matching to questions and inside that questions index dot answer zeroth index. So what we have to do, CSS class is equal to I'm just typing here as correct. I have to give here these quotations. We can also give double quotations. So what we have to do, I am just going to compare these values. And for the else case, it can be as CSS class wrong. Now I have to set all these values. I'm just going to take here some other component. Summary.css, and here I am going to point out all these values. These are classes. Font weight as bold and dot. Now I am pointing out to our null which is skipped here. Control C, and I am now pointing to that skipped as its color would be as I'm just taking white, and white will not make any sense here because it's already white. So I'm just taking wheat. I have to import it here. Import .css. Now I am just pointing these elements inside our map because we don't need these values at outside. So I am just typing here this value, and what we have to do now, I have created all these elements, and here inside my summary component I have pointer to skip and custom answers. So what I have to do now, I am just going to point out to that class which is correct. I am just typing here dot, and here I am just typing color as green. Let me see what is the third one wrong. Let me also copy it. Control Z, and I am going to copy it, and now I have to paste it here. Color as red. Now if I save it and move to our output, it is not showing any color here because we have not set our that class. We have to set that class here. Class name, because I am just going to use here these curly braces, so I don't need to give here as quotations to red. If I save it, and now you can see that all the values are not correct. That's why it is showing the color as red. So let me make any one value as correct inside my questions. That questions we have all the values true as library. So for this time I will select some value as library. First is selected as library, second is wrong, and third would be as empty. And all of these and a library. And here you can see we have different colors, skipped color and red color, green color. Now I want to display also the percentage of how many questions are correctly answered and how many questions are skipped, as well as how many questions are wrong answered. So I am just going to display this thing just after that quiz completed header tag. And here I am going to take a div, and inside that div I am taking 3 paragraphs, 3 p tags. I'm just going to copy it and paste it at 3 times, but just wait for the moment. I'm taking here 3 spans. I'm just copying it and pasting it at bottom. So at this thing I'm just typing percentage, and here I'm just typing skipped. Now I'm going to copy it and paste it 2 more times. Correctly answered. Now if I save it, and you can see it is showing 1 at the bottom of other. So I want to display these things in a single line. So for this thing, here inside that div I have to take style and I'm just writing display flex. Now you can see all the values are in the same line. Percentage and skipped answer. So I have to use here BR. Now if I save it, and one thing more that I wanna do, space between, justify content as space around. Now it's looking awesome. I have mistakenly refreshed that page. But it has no one mistake that it is not fully responsive. So for this thing I can also use here a row class name as column medium device 12, and here class name as row, and now inside that column I am going to paste all the code. It is still not responsive. I think I have to refresh that page. No, it is not responsive. Let me see what is the problem. I have to also use all the code inside a row. Class name as row, class name of column medium device 12, now it is fully responsive. Inside our that thing I'm just typing percentage So how can we set the percentage? As we know that the user answer is a props, but this is an array, and inside that array we have all the values. Now I am just pointing and working with that user answer. And here I am just typing const skipped answer is equal to user answer dot filter. Now I have to pass here an element and a callback function, and here I have to make a condition that how many values satisfy that condition. Is equal to null. Now the skipped answer is a const type variable, and inside that variable we have the values which are totally null inside that user answer. So here now I have to point out to correctly answered is equal to user answer dot filter. Now what I have to do, I have to also pass the index with that element, because now we will start from first element of that array and will move to the end element. So I'm just typing here index. I'm just pointing to question. If I type here element, which is ELE, is equal to questions index dot answers of 0th index. So this filter would return all the elements to that correct answer. By satisfying that condition, if all the elements satisfy that condition, it will store these elements inside that correct answer. So for the first time, here ELE is pointing to the first element till the last element one by one, and all the elements now compared with that code which I have written questions dot index 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on till the end element of the questions array dot answers 0 index, because every answers 0 index is the correct value. So now we can also type const wrong ans. So I am just going to display the percentage. You can also type that how many questions are correctly answered or wrong answered. And here let me first show you the total answers which are correct or wrong. Here I am typing Ctrl V, which I have to write inside curly braces, and correct answers Ctrl C, and I am going to paste it here. Now, what we have to show here, I want to show just how many total elements are correctly answered. For this thing, I have to type here skip is equal to skipped ans dot length, and here I am just typing const is equal to correct ans dot length. I should also pass these values here. Correct. I have passed that correct. Now I have to pass skp to here. Now if I save it, You can see here it is showing 0 answer skipped and 2 answers are correct, and here we have not mentioned till now. So what if we want to show here the percentage? That's quite simple. We will simply write the total length of the array and we will make some multiplications and percentage. So we don't gonna make here percentage. I'm just going to type here how many questions are skipped and correctly answered and wrong answered. Const wrong ans is equal to user ans. We can also simply write here that total length of that array, which is user ans dot length. I am going to store it inside an element. Const total ans is equal to, now we have the total values inside that element. Now I am going to make here total ans minus skp minus correct. Now what is happened? If we deduct the skipped answer and correct answer from total elements, then we have left with wrong answer. So if we copy it, Control C, and now I gonna paste it here. Now if I save it and move to our output, and here you can see we have 3 correctly answered or 2 and wrong answered or 3 and skipped as 0. So here just after this row I gonna make here HR and I gonna also take here a break. Now it is looking awesome. So this is all about today and I hope you understood it clearly.